my back actually went out last year. Not dramatically where I was bulging discs or herniating anything. Right? There was no hospital visit, no dramatic pop in the middle of a deadlift. It was just like, whoa, I bent over to grab a bar that I would normally deadlift uh, as a warm up weight and just wanted to rack the damn thing. And something in my low back said, nah, bro, not today, right? That thing tightened up. And I tried to finish the workout, and it just didn't feel any better because typically when something like that would happen, I could continue on and it would loosen up over time. But for about 2 weeks after, I was walking around like a 70-year-old, regretting almost every life decision. And the wildest part was that I wasn't doing anything intense. I was actually just unracking and racking a barbell with a weight on it that I had just done a set of 8 barbell rows with. And I share this as the reminder that our bodies are as fragile as we let them be, but it's one of those weird fragility things where you're not fragile because you're weak. You're kind of just fragile like a bomb, like it could go off at any point, right? And this is one of the things that nobody warns us about when we stop playing our sport competitively. Like, don't worry about the rec stuff you did after. Like, it really is going from taking the uniform off for the final time and trying to be an adult about things, right? Because these injuries don't actually come from doing too much in the weight room typically, right? A lot of times they come from the gap between where you are now and where you think you used to be and where you should be, right? And so it's where your brain still is, but where your body is prepared for now. That's the gap that injury tends to sneak in the front door. So if you don't remember, welcome back to the show. I'm Jenny, and this episode we're going to talk about something that I wrote in this last week's Substack as my 4 rules for training for what I call the second season of your athletic life, where you've played a sport, you've been competitive, now you're into the next phase or that second season of life. So if you're a former athlete, and again, former is not a derogatory term, but it just means that you played a sport in college, maybe you played some professional, or you were really good at high school and just chose not to play at the next level. Maybe you're just a competitive gym rat, right? Really, anything where your job was based on how your body performed, these episodes are specifically for you because I know how your brain works when you do make it to the gym. And I'm going to focus on the folks who actually do go into the gym to train now. We'll have more episodes on the folks who need to get into the gym. But remember, I'm just like you. I know that stubbornness of wanting to do the hard thing and enjoying it like a psychopath. And I know the muscle memory of pushing through the hard workouts. But I also know that along the way, we've collected injuries, some nicks, some niggles, like some little things that just tend to quietly build up in our bodies, kind of like trophies nobody asked for. So let's talk about these 4 rules and, kind of where they came from. So if we flash back to that low back situation I had going, I'm not even going to call it an injury. It was more just like I did something dumb. I had a few things pile up, and my body said, you know what? Enough. And to be honest, this wasn't the first time that something like this had happened. It just allowed me to have a moment of honesty with myself. Now, over the years, because I've trained from pretty much 2005, I'm not going to count the stuff I did in high school because that was kind of self-guided, not super structured. There was a little bit of exposure to actually training. I was training for sport specifically in middle and high school. Like, how am I going to be a better basketball player? Once I get to college, the strength training really kind of took grasp of me and made me the player that I ended up being. And that's the one thing that I've carried over, right? So over the years, as I did CrossFit, as I did some stupid competitions, right, a few minor things would pile up from time to time, right? I had, the back thing. I had a shoulder thing that would get kind of pissy if I did a lot of pulling or overhead work without a good warm up. Every once in a while now, I've got a knee that reminds me that, hey, dummy, don't sit for so long. You need to get up and move. And individually, those things aren't that bad. But when you start to pile them on, right, I start to recognize a pattern with myself, and I also see the same pattern with a lot of my clients. And so you kind of start asking yourself, and I've asked myself this question a lot, like, why am I trying to train like the athlete I was? Or should I be training like the former athlete, the one who will always be an athlete but is out of competitive sport, who's actually trying to build a life and a career? Because I don't know about you, but I got bills to pay too, and basketball ain't doing it right now. So it's this difference of, what are you training for right now? Are you training for the life that you are trying to build, or are you training for the life that you had, where you're trying to earn a starting spot, or you're trying to just make a team? Like, you've got to differentiate what you are used to doing and what you need to do moving forward. Because those minor injuries were something that was a signal. They were trying to tell me something. They weren't just random aches and boo-boos and pains. These were things that my body was trying to signal, whoa, hey, you're approaching a level of intensity and duration that you're not ready for, right? What you're able to recover from doesn't match what you're demanding from your body. And that is a signal worth paying attention to. And that's what I want you to hold on as we go through. If you're in the gym and you're working hard and you're redlining every single workout, that's cool. And I'm glad you have that kind of time. But you also have to remember, your biological clock is ticking. And so the later you get into the shot clock, if you will, the less recovery capacity your body's going to have. And I want you to hold on to this word capacity too, because your career, your second season, is based on your new work capacity. So if you haven't been training, your work capacity is going to be decreased relative to what it could be if you were working out consistently. Now, this is not saying go spend 3 to 4 hours in the gym every single day. This is, nah, dog, we're doing 20 to 30 minutes of something almost every day to keep that work capacity high. And it's not the gym fitness stuff that I'm necessarily concerned about. I'm more concerned about the work capacity you have in your life with your job, your family, right? The thing that you're building after sports, that's what I'm worried about as it relates to your work capacity. Because the stronger you are, the more resilient you'll be. You'll spend less time taking sick days. You'll spend more time enjoying the life that you've built because you're able to actually enjoy it. You're able. Another key word there, right? So when you're consistently beat up, you're constantly sore. Like, I know some CrossFit brands have made millions of dollars off the idea of just being sore and beat up. And you've got the rhabdo clown and all that stuff that goes along with it. I know, I've been in that culture. I embraced it, right? You embrace the suck. But when you're trying to recover or you're operating at half the capacity, it doesn't just affect your training. It affects your output everywhere else, right? It's your energy, your focus, your mood. Like, we already have enough issues paying attention to stuff at work because we've got this cool thing called Instagram that we like to scroll and troll on, right? So your capacity and your output affect how you show up for the people around you. And again, this is more for those who are overdoing it on the training side, right? Your training shouldn't be recreational, right? Because your health is a performance asset. And once I started thinking about it that way, not as something that I needed to maintain, but as something I was actively investing in for my life outside the gym, that's where everything shifted, right? I was training hard. And don't get me wrong, I still train hard. But using these 4 rules or these principles that I mapped out allowed me to lean into my training for myself and my clients who are in the same situation, so that I know that if I abide by these, I'm not going to overdo it. I'm going to allow plenty of space for recovery, and I'm going to be able to show up as my best self for the work that pays the bills. Hooping at 24-hour fitness ain't it. Going to play pickleball every once in a while is cool, but again, that doesn't pay the bill. So if I get hurt doing those things, that actually negatively impacts my life and my paycheck and my bank account and all the things that will help me live an independent lifestyle. Okay? So these 4 principles come from real life. Like from me learning the hard way, from my clients learning the hard way. And I've seen it play out over and over again. So that's what we're going to start to talk about, right? So these 4 rules. And I'm going to do a deep dive on each one of them because I talked about what they were in the article. But I want to talk about why each of them matter and what this kind of looks like in practice. And then potentially we'll get into what happens if you ignore them, right? Because I think knowing what happens when you ignore them is probably the most useful piece of those things. Like, yeah, knowing how to do it and why is important, but understanding the implications of completely not doing it, that I think can be a rude awakening for some folks. So let's quickly review these 4, and then we'll get into it. So first one, we're not making massive jumps in intensity. And I'll explain what that means here in just a second. Okay. Rule 2, I'm not chasing PRs. I don't obsess over them. That's just not what I need to do right now. Rule 3, deload. And if you don't know what a deload is, I'll also explain that. But we want to deload when life's stress gets crazy. Okay. And then the final rule, go ahead and listen to your body before it forces you to listen. Like you've got the option up front. Don't make it act like your mama and make you do the thing that you don't want to do. Okay. So we've got these 4 rules, and they're all connected and intertwined, and they're all rooted in the same core idea that sustainable training beats heroic training every single time. Now, heroic, not to be confused with Train Heroic, which is the platform that we use with my clients, but kind of just beating yourself up every single day, hoping that you create a physiological adaptation. That's not the route to go. Hoping that you lose some weight. Again, not the route to go. You don't have to be constantly sore to see results. And these 4 rules, if you follow them, will help you still continue to train hard relative to your ability, but it actually lends itself to training much more intelligently so you can actually see the results. Because why on earth are you fucking training if you're not going to see results? If you're just doing it as a mental release, that's cool. But we built these bodies to do something special. Let's just be smart about it now that we're a little bit older, okay? So, rule number 1, we are going to avoid massive jumps in intensity, okay? So most people, they actually don't get hurt going hard. They don't, right? Like if you're used to going hard, typically it ain't the hard thing that creates the boo-boo. The people who get hurt are the ones who go from sitting on the couch to trying to go do the hard thing, right? The HIIT workout, the pickup basketball game. They're going from 0 to 100 real quick, and then they pay for it, right? So if we are avoiding these massive leaps and bounds in intensity, then we're able to train at a much more sustainable pace. So instead of going out and hitting one really hard workout and then having to take the next 3 days off, we give a little bit and leave a little bit in the tank after each one. So here's the thing that you and I get in trouble with, right? We know how to work hard. That's not the problem, right? The problem is we know how to flip the switch. Rather than treating it as a dial, this thing is a switch, right? You've done it your whole career. Preseason hits, head down, eyes up, you flip that switch, right? You figure out how to survive 2-a-days. You hit the timing that you needed for the line drill, right? Your brain is wired for it. But at 35 or 40 or 45, you aren't the same machine that you were at 20. And this is not for me to break it down. It's just biology. You're twice as old as you were when you were competitive. And those recovery timelines change exponentially, right? Your connective tissue requires more input for big spikes in load than it ever has. I was just talking with some of my friends this morning, and of the 10 conversations I had, 2 Achilles. That's a 20% Achilles tear rate or injury rate. We don't know if it's torn yet. One is still in imaging and the other one is recovering from one. But 2 out of my 10 friends that I've talked to just in one day, what do you think they did? They got off the couch and instead of calling me, they said, you know what? I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to go hit a hard workout. And the tissue didn't keep up with them, right? So with this, right, when you've been out of a consistent training rhythm, which a lot of my clients, that's kind of what they do when they come to me. It's like, I've tried to do it on my own, I haven't been able to do it, right? So when they come to me, they aren't in a rhythm of training. And they still have this mismatch of mental toughness and physical readiness of, I can do the hard thing, I know I can up here, but this can't keep up. You've got years of use, misuse, abuse, disuse. I probably already said that one, right? You got a lot of miles on your wheels. We want to make sure that you build up to it. I'm not going to ever hold you back from doing anything hard, but I am going to throttle you a little bit to grade you into intensity so that you're ready for it. Because the last thing you need is to be crutching around your office because you decided to tear an Achilles, or to be wheeling around because you're getting your ACL repaired for the 3rd or 4th time, right? So remember, most people aren't going to get hurt from going hard. They're going to get hurt from doing the hard thing that they're not prepared for. Going from 0 to 100, right? So what does avoiding these jumps look like, right? So it means building intentionally. That means following structure. And a lot of times it's easy to skip those early phases because they're relatively easy. They don't feel like they're doing anything. But think about it this way. Your easier phases are building your tissues, they're retraining your movement patterns, and they're helping build that aerobic base. So all of the things that help you eventually lose fat, gain muscle, be more resilient when training actually does get hard, right? So it may not feel like enough, and one of my clients is actually going through this right now where we're heading into month 2, and month 1 she was like, can we do something a little harder? I was like, no, because the last time you tried to do that on your own, your back hurt for months on end. So far, we've had 0 flare-ups, and the one day that I thought about flaring up was because you decided to make a jump in weight. So it's one of those things where we can be honest with what we're doing, and I'm not trying to trick you. I want to make sure that we're building a large enough foundation to then go and do the cool stuff that you want to do, right? And then once you're ready to handle the hard training and you go through a hard block of training, you can shift your focus. This is where the training becomes a non-negotiable. You can dial back the intensity. You can spend a little bit more time on mobility work. Maybe you focus on some endurance, right? But it's all the stuff that allows your body to recover and adapt before you push again. So instead of it looking like a straight line going up with intensity, it should look like more of an ebb and flow into intensity where you push a little bit, back off, push a little bit, back off, right? It's a wave, right? This is the mistake that we make, is keeping that wave constantly high. Then that becomes a tsunami, and that's a much bigger problem than we want to deal with. But when we think about how adaptation actually works, we do a little bit of breaking down and a lot of building up. A little bit of breaking down. That's how the change happens. That's how you lose weight. That's how you build muscle. That's how you get that athletic aesthetic that you're looking for. And I've had a client in the past, another former D1 basketball player, who had been out of organized training for about 6 years and came to me ready to do something, right? Like fire in the eyes, ready to go. Like they wanted to do all the HIIT workouts. They wanted to do this. They wanted to be able to dunk. And I pumped the brakes for him for week 1. And we were like, whoa, bro, this is not what's going to work for you. Mostly because he had a history of injury, but also he hadn't been doing anything. So for me to break my own rule of going from couch to pretty much marathon workouts, that wasn't going to work for him because his tendons and joints weren't ready for that load. His muscles might have been fine, maybe a little sore. He might have been walking around like a 70-year-old for a couple days. But I needed those connective tissues and some of the joints and just the tolerance to movement to build up. So 3 months later, right, we flashed back to the beginning. We weren't doing very much, but then now we flash forward 90 days. Now he's doing things he hadn't done since college. But we were doing it with a high quality of work and a high quality of effort because we ramped up to it. If we would have started at day 90 instead of day 0, it wouldn't have been the same case, right? We have to remember that shortcuts have a cost. It's typically pain and suffering. But the shortcut does have a physical and often mental cost because you go and try to do the hard thing and you fail. We're all competitive. We don't want to lose. So not only are we pissed because we didn't do the thing, now maybe we're even a little bit discouraged because we're like, shit, maybe we aren't the person we thought we were, right? Take the time, build the base, and we'll build up from there. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, and I catch myself daydreaming about PRs from time to time. But the moment that you can stop worrying about the weight that you're using is going to be the best day of your life. Because the day that the weight on the bar stopped mattering was the moment that scoreboard turned off. The buzzer sounded, the lights go down, the jersey comes off. After that, nobody cares how much you can squat, deadlift, bench press, how many pull-ups you can do. Your body is going to respond to tension. That's the thing that we're chasing. I could care less about the number that is actually on the bar or in your hand in the dumbbell or the kettlebell that you're using, right? And this one might be one of the hardest ones for us to wrap our heads around, right? We're competitors, right? We are wired to measure, to have feedback, to get the data to know if we're improving or not. That's how we're built. That's how we got to the position we're in now, right? We spent years with scoreboards, player rankings. If you ran track, you had split times, right? All of this stuff, you're bringing that baggage into the gym. But the PRs that we're chasing now have nothing to do with the weight on the bar. They're typically financial in nature. How much can I make in a year? How much vacation can I earn this year, right? Those have nothing to do with how much weight you use. When I'm talking to a client about using a challenging weight, it's typically not because I want them to do a heavier weight. I want them to chase a feeling of intensity, a feeling of tension. You could get that with 5 pounds, maybe it's 50 pounds. But I also need you to focus on the feeling, not on the number, right? And if you are focusing on the weight that's on the bar, you're putting that weight in charge of your training instead of you being in charge. And that's a tough one to swallow, right? Like, I want to be in charge of the direction of my life. So if I am worried about the feelings that training gives me, I'm going to be in a really good spot. But if I'm constantly worried about the weight that I lift and then, oh God forbid, we compare that to others, we've lost all control. And so, right, I want you to think about it this way. If you're in the gym and you're having an off day, right? You slept like absolute garbage. Work is probably a little bit more stressful. You slept like garbage. Maybe you're a little underhydrated as well, because those typically go hand in hand. And you walk in and you're like, yep, today's the day. I'm hitting that lifetime PR on the back squat. Well, you put that weight on the bar and your body, once you get to the bottom of that squat, says, not today, Junior. But you put it on there anyway, because that's the number. And then you're like, well, shoot, that didn't work, right? And so when things go wrong, you get all pissed because you went to a weight and were so focused on the weight rather than focused on the feeling that you had going into the workout. And this one sort of aligns with one of the other rules of listening to your body before it forces you to listen, right? But if you're just building up to a weight that feels good for the day, I'm good with that. You should be good with that. Because you're not comparing yourself. Unless you have gotten into the sport, and let me say this loudly, unless you have gotten into the sport of powerlifting and you step on a platform to lift a weight in front of people and be judged for it, the weight on the bar doesn't matter. The traditional squat, bench, and deadlift, they don't matter. I can train your body to look really good and to function even better without you ever having to touch a barbell. And so if I can help you stop worrying about the weight that you're using and start worrying about how you feel using different weights, that's going to be a much higher quality of stimulus. That's going to help with the consistency of your training, and often is going to help you feel better walking out of the gym than you felt walking in, right? So instead of chasing a PR, every once in a while you're going to hit one and it's going to feel really good, but you're not chasing that. I want you to chase what I call heavy for today. I want you to build up for what is required to feel heavy for the rep range that you have. So if it's a heavy set of 4, then you build up to your heaviest set of 4 for today, right? It's a weight that genuinely challenges you, but it doesn't completely bury you. And it may vary because stress in life varies. Your sleep varies. Your hydration varies, right? So all of these things, we want to push for what we have for today and then allow ourselves to recover so that we can bounce back and do it again versus just hammering yourself for no doggone reason, right? And so some days, heavy for today is going to be a PR, and that's awesome. So we're going to celebrate that. But some days, heavy for today is going to be 20% lighter than your best in this training cycle. But that's fine, because the goal and the win here is you showed up, you trained intelligently, and you're going to recover and bounce back better, okay? And the folks who are still training hard and developing that work capacity that enhances their career, they figure this out. They know what it feels like. They're not worried about lifetime PRs at this point. They want to look good, they want to feel good, and they want to be their best selves when it comes to making a paycheck, right? That's like, we could probably do a whole thing on rule number 2. But for now, let your body be the coach and listen to it. You're coachable, right? Listen to your coach. Okay. All right. So it brings us to rule number 3. Deload when life gets crazy. You're not planning on deloading when things are calm. That's usually not when it goes. Now, if I were still working in the sports performance side of things, I'm working with a team, I'm working with current competing athletes. Deloads are planned as a refresh so that we can continue pushing, right? And we have them planned because typically their lives are much more structured. Okay? For you guys and for myself, I rarely plan a deload. And the reason is the deload will happen naturally. When life gets stressful, you dial back the intensity. When life gets stressful and you ramp the intensity, that's where things start to go a little sideways. Okay? So when life gets crazy, we're going to bring the intensity down. And not meaning you're going to stop working out altogether, meaning we're going to work to that heavy for today that we just talked about, but maybe we cut the amount of work that we're doing in half. So the relative intensity, how hard you're actually working, is going to stay high. But the amount of volume that you're going to do at that intensity is going to decrease. So instead of an hour workout 5 days a week, maybe you get in a 30-minute workout 5 days a week, hitting the big stuff and cutting all the fluff that typically comes along with it. So maybe this week you don't get to train arms. Don't worry, your Angela Bassett arms aren't going anywhere. Those Michelle's, baby, they're not going anywhere. You're still going to have the muscle, but you're not training yourself into oblivion and have to deal with the crazy stuff that's going on outside. Kids, school, work, community, all of the things that typically tend to happen at once. We're not worried about that. Okay? So a lot of folks tend to think of a deload as something that you earn, right? You train hard for 6 weeks, get to take it easy for a week, and, well, yeah, there's some logic in that, but I'd say 80% of the folks that I work with, they get stuff thrown at them left and right. And so what we have to do is take advantage of the time that we have to work hard, but then get in what we can fit in when life gets busy, right? Maybe you do have 6 straight weeks where you're able to go hard and, okay, well, that's good. But for the most part, if we look at those same 6 weeks, you're going to miss a session because you've traveled. Something blows up at work. A kid gets sick, right? There's something that's always going to come up. So when that deload arrives, if we're getting to week 6 and we're like, oh, yeah, cool, I'm ready, you actually don't need it. It's a wasted week of effort. So I want you to reframe this, right? So if you're into this idea of a deload, don't plan it around calm periods when nothing is going on. Calm periods are when you can actually train the hardest because you have less external stress. Plan your less intense, less hard weeks during hard periods. Work when you can, recover when you need to. That's the idea. Work hard when you can, and then recover when you need to. So that means when life is chaotic, right? High stress at work. Maybe you're going through a big transition. You've got travel. Maybe you and your partner are having some issues, so you've got a larger emotional load, right? That's the time to cut back in the gym. This is not time to push through or white knuckle. Your gas tank kind of dwindles down to empty, right? Pull back, give the same effort in fewer sessions, in shorter sessions, and maybe work in a little bit more mindfulness. This might be the time that you start to incorporate the 3 to 5 minutes of breathing at the end of a workout because it supports your nervous system and it doesn't tax it any further. You already got a lot, right, going on, right? So when you settle down and you get some of your bandwidth back, then you go train harder. That's when you do the hard stuff, okay? So think of it this way. The gym responds to your life. It doesn't fight with it. So when you're trying to be the hero and force those tough sessions during the hardest weeks of your life, you're not actually tough. Let me just go ahead and tell you what it is. You're dumb. Okay? Right? You're depleting an already depleted system. You are running on the fumes of fumes, right? And this is one of the fastest ways to injury. And for a lot of folks, quitting the gym altogether, right? I've seen it with regular people. I've seen it with clients who have come to me, right? They're burned out. They're doing too much, too often, with not enough recovery. And they're over here thinking they lack discipline. No, they lack the discipline to do less. And once we go through and unpack your history and understanding why you were training hard during the worst moments of life, and then we start to understand why that didn't last, and you can see why it's not a willpower problem, right? It's a design problem. We have learned to push through. We want to be in control, which is why we tend to go harder during the hardest periods of life, because that's the thing that we control. But what we need to do is put it in autopilot, get a little bit in, just get enough of a stimulus to maintain what we got, and actually deal with the funky stuff that's going on in our lives. Deal with it. Don't use the gym as a refuge. Use it as a resource, right? If we can protect our base, we can start to build you back strategically, and you'll come back stronger. All right, so there's three. Okay, last one. And I've alluded to this one already. Your body isn't trying to trick you into not going to the gym once training has become a non-negotiable. It's trying to protect you. My watch, and I've talked about the readiness score before. I also look at my HRV. That HRV is pretty indicative of if you have a cold coming on, if you're starting to get run down. Like if you look at your trend line over the 4-week graph that at least Garmin gives you, you'll start to notice, oh, I was sick last week. Look at the previous week and see how your HRV bottoms out, right? This is one way to listen to your body before it forces you to, of, oh, my HRV is starting to tank. Maybe this is not the week that I'm going to go and train really hard every day. Maybe it's the week that I go train hard enough for what I have the energy to do, okay? And this is probably the one that I feel most strongly about, because it's the one that separates folks who train for decades from the people who blow up and give up, okay? So listen to your body. It will give you early warning signs, right? It's your HRV. It's your stiff joints in the morning. It's maybe a shoulder that's getting a little achy when you unrack the bar, right? I noticed this last week, and again, I've been training hard. I'm trying to get back into the groove of things after taking a deload week, because I had a lot going on, right? And getting my sleep quality back to where it needs to be was one of the toughest things to do, right? If you're feeling flat during your warm-up, right? That's another indicator of you've gotten to the gym. You've made it. You've forced yourself to get there. You've started your warm-up and you still feel like crap. That's not a willpower thing. You've done the hardest part of getting your butt to the gym. But if you're still feeling like meh once you finish the warm-up, red flag, okay? Because these are all signals. And the question is, when you have these signals, should you act on them when they're little tiny signals, or when they become something you just can't ignore, right? Well, we know the answer to that. You act on them when they're small, before they become a bigger issue. And it's something that I have to reinforce with my clients all the time. I and you don't get paid to push through physical breakdown anymore. In college, some of my teammates got cortisone shots. Some of them had their knees drained before games. We're not that reliant on our body, right? We were out there competing. We were playing through discomfort. There was a certain amount of calculus that we had to go through to survive the season, to get through the end of the season, through the games that actually mattered, especially when your teammates needed you. And there was a real reason, right? We were trying to win championships. Had it just been rec league and your knee was sore, you probably would have sat out. But guess what? You had coaches who depended on you. You had teammates who depended on you. And that's why you had an entire support staff to help you perform when your team needed you the most. However, that is not your life right now. You don't have a season that you're prepping for or competing in. There is no game. Like there's no once or twice a week thing that you have to ramp up for and then cycle through, right? You don't actually have to grind through these warning signals anymore. If you do, then you're running the risk of it costing you 2 to 3 weeks to recover from. And then what? Right? Your body is trying to protect you. And when you honor these signals, when you back off, you get some extra sleep. Maybe you're in a cut and you're like, oh, I'm super achy. Maybe you take a nutrition deload week where you're not in such a restrictive diet pattern anymore, right? Maybe instead of going for the long, hard interval run, maybe you just do some walking and some mobility work, right? And that's where your body learns to trust your decision making, and it won't have to continue to send these little signals. But if it doesn't, those signals get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And this also allows you to build a better relationship with your training that is sustainable over years, not months. Because the hardest thing is not getting started, it's continuing to go. Okay? So if you ignore these signs, you're just borrowing against future training time. You're taking from what you could do to use right now, and it's wasted effort, right? And that's, to be honest, that's where I see a lot of folks get into trouble, right? So if you are into using a monitoring tool like a watch or a ring or any of these bands, right? Remember, we're not optimizing your performance. We're just using it as a check-in, right? It's a more objective way to validate your subjective feelings of, yeah, I don't feel like going today. Is it because I don't feel like going and I'm unmotivated, or is my body trying to tell me something? So if you're going to use some of these devices, use them, right? Help it turn off your competitive brain and to give you valid data for when to push and when to back off, right? Because you don't need your joints barking at you. You don't need to be sleeping like crap, especially if we can back it up with a little bit of data, right? So listen to your body early, respond quickly, and then this will help you train longer, because the longer we can train, the more consistently we can train, the better we're going to be. Because especially if you're like me and you're trying to keep that athletic aesthetic of, I want to look like I know ball, then I need to be consistent with it. I need to make sure I've got my nutrition dialed in. I've got my training on point, but not to a point where I'm just beat up and broken. Okay? So those are the 4 rules. Let me bring this thing back home, because you've been hanging out, right? Here are the things. Avoid massive jumps in intensity. Don't go chasing waterfalls or PRs. Deload. Use that tool when life gets crazy, and listen to your body, right? All of these have in common one thing, and that is a shift in what you're optimizing for. We're not optimizing for physical output and performance. We are optimizing for output and performance in the thing that pays our bills. Your ability to show up to a meeting and be articulate and have an executive presence. Your training supports everything that you do in your second season. Your career, your family, your life. So if you want to live a high quality life and have a illustrious career as a professional, not as a professional athlete, because we're done with that, right? Then it requires you adjusting your operating system just a little bit. That doesn't say to completely deaden your competitive edge. It's just to redirect it, all right? So if fitness is your foundation for this, it is the foundation for everything else that you are building, right? All of this is downstream of how well you take care of your physical base. And taking care of that physical base means you're training smart, not just hard. You got to have both. So my clients who are training with me, who are in their 40s, 50s, I got a couple in their 60s, guys, they're still strong. They are moving well and they're still hungry, right? They're not training hard for anyone else. They're training hard for themselves. They're training smarter for themselves. And they've actually been able to make peace with this season of their life. And so they're building a capacity that will enhance everything that they do. And that's what the second season protocol is all about. It's not about declining and just letting age do what it will. This is about playing a different game, right? So, as always, thank you for listening to my rants and raves, right? And if this hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Another former athlete, and a forever athlete is probably what I should be calling you guys, who's either grinding themselves into the ground or someone who's quit training altogether, right? This is our third option of doing something, but doing it with purpose, doing it with structure, and doing it intelligently. We'll talk.